Okay, so we just read through Source B for the first time with me reading it to you. Now we're going to go through some tasks together that are going to be about moving from categorizing what type of text it is into looking for things that are similar. So we're going to be looking for comparisons. So when we think about comparisons, we're using words like this text is like the text we read about Andrew Green because both are linked to the idea of ghosts. This text is about ... and so is Andrew Green's. So we're going to be looking together at some similarities. Now, just to remind you, some of our icons, we have this little personal response button here, and the little reminder that you are to be reading this page again. So we're going to read through this part of the article, but where we're going to start extending our brains and building what we know before, I'm going to ask you some questions to think, well, how is this text like the Andrew Green text? So you might want to pause at certain points and think back to your lesson yesterday when we read the Andrew Green text about Ghostbusters, and just say, well, actually, they're both like this. So I'm going to just talk us through the first one together. And then on a couple of the future slides, I'm going to ask you to come up with your own answer. Okay, so this is the beginning of Source A again, the 19th century, which is the Victorian source. So we're right back in the past, whereas Andrew Green's was 20th century, a modern text. So that doesn't make them the same, that makes them different. There's some differences in these texts over time. But right now we're thinking about things that are the same. So I now offer a trustworthy account, which has come to my own knowledge of an appearance of someone present at the time of death. Many years ago, Mrs. D, a person in humble life, but have tried and proved truthfulness, and rather matter of fact, said to me in conversation about ghosts and ghost seeing, I never saw a ghost, but I have seen a spirit rise. Okay, so if we just look at the opening of this text, the first question I want us to be thinking about is, how is this text like the other text? And these stems are here to help us get our thoughts started. Now, personal response means you can just answer this to yourself out loud, or you can write down the sentence and complete it in your book. So the personal response is your choice at this stage, okay? So it says here, both texts are about. So what is the link? What is the thing that is the same across these texts? So just to give us a little clue, I've underlined this phrase, ghosts and ghost seeing, because that's reminding me that the Andrew Green interviewer, he was a Ghostbuster too. So we could say both these texts are about ghosts or the world of ghosts. So for this next task, we're looking for things that are the same. Okay, so both texts are about ghosts. Now here it says both texts claim to have information from something sources. So if we look at the paragraph here that's on the screen, our writer begins with this interesting phrase. Now remember, we are in the Victorian era, so the wording and phrasing can be different. I now offer a trustworthy account, which has come to my knowledge. And then at the beginning of the second paragraph, she repeats a similar idea that Mrs. D was a tried and proved truthfulness. So this writer is trying to convince us that this is a trustworthy account, that she's got her information from a trustworthy and truthful source. Now, do you think that is something both texts are doing, or is it something only this text is doing? So I'm just going to ask you to pause, think back to yesterday, the article by Andrew Green, and decide, are they both trying to give us information from trustworthy sources, or is it another answer we're looking for? Right, brilliant. I hope you had a few minutes there just to stop and think about it. So we're looking for things at this point that are the same. So do we think that text A is trustworthy? Is it giving us the opinion of somebody that we can trust? And the answer is yes. Andrew Green is presented to us as a trustworthy source, as an investigator who can prove what he's done over time. So we can complete this statement. Both texts, so that lovely kind of phrase there at the beginning, both, to remind us we're looking at similarities, claim to have information from trustworthy sources. Now, again, I do need you to listen to me, guys. You can be writing and completing these statements in your books, or at this point, you can just be thinking in your head for your personal response, thinking out loud, but following along, okay? So it is your choice at this stage how you respond. Okay, so let's look at the next section. Okay, so a slightly longer section to remind ourselves of. And it says here at the bottom, just to guide us this time as we read, we're going to be thinking about whether or not both texts include accounts of people seeing ... So as we remind ourselves of this section, we're going to be thinking, well, is there anything here that's the same or different to Andrew Green? So if you tell me what you saw, I said, I'll write it as you speak and will beg you to sign your name. This she did, and the present account is copied from her own words as I wrote them, and she put her signature. When I was 16 years old, I was nursing a child of 7 who'd been ill since his birth with disease of the head. He'd been for some days expected to die, but was quite sensible. About noon, I left him in the back parlour on the ground floor. His mother and a friend were with him. I was returning from the kitchen to the child and had just reached the top of the staircase when I saw, coming from the door of the room, the form of the little child. It did not step on the ground, but immediately went up over the staircase and disappeared from me. The bed on which the sick child had been lying was close to the door of the room, and that door was not more than a foot from the top of the staircase which I came up. As I entered the room, his mother said, "He is gone." The figure that I saw was a child, fair and fresh looking and perfectly healthy. It looked fatter and younger than the little sick boy and had a very animated, happy expression. It was like a living child, only so light. Okay, so that's her account. So actually, both these texts include accounts of people seeing what? So you're just going to pause and think to yourself, what's the link between this section and the article we read yesterday? Both texts includes accounts of people seeing. What do you think the answer is going to be? Pause for 10 seconds, come up with your own answer, and then we'll share. Absolutely, you got it spot on. So both texts includes accounts of people seeing. We could have gone for choices here. Spirits, because in the Andrew Green text it talks about the baker, the guy that used to work in the bakery, and that he would appear to other people. We could say both texts include accounts of people seeing strange things or strange phenomena or ghostly occurrences. So there is a little bit of scope here for variation, but really these texts are both linked because they're accounts of people seeing things that cannot be easily explained. Okay, on this next page, you're going to read it. I'm going to ask you to pause to read the paragraph to yourself this time, and then decide how you would complete this statement. Now, slightly different focus here because I'd like you to choose one of our key words. So would you say that both texts are describing events that are a hoax, inexplicable, or impregnated? So you're going to read this paragraph. You're going to come up with your choice of word. I would love it if you could use a because to give me a reason, if you could stretch your answer that way. But if not, we're looking to choose one of these key words, one of our key vocabulary words to complete the sentence. So pause your screens and complete your answer now. Brilliant. So which word did you choose, guys? And I'm thinking I've had some lovely responses this week already from Jake and Holly and Molly and James. Lots of people out there that I know are getting involved and doing their work, which is brilliant. So what else have other people come up with? The answer that you've chosen is... think about that. I can't hear you, but I can imagine that you're definitely choosing inexplicable. If you remember, inexplicable means something that cannot be explained or easily understood. And both of these texts are describing events that are inexplicable. Okay, so again, actually then, we've got a similar activity. You'll see it here, so I'm going to ask you to pause in a minute. I am encouraging you at this stage to read the paragraphs again for yourselves, just to refresh your memory. And then you're going to complete this statement for me. Both texts try to prove that the events are not part of a... and you're going to decide. So we're looking for another similarity. And pause now and come up with your answer. Brilliant. So again, I'm hoping you've been able to read that paragraph in the time you paused it for. And what word have you chosen? Right, so it can't be inexplicable. You're absolutely right. We've already got rid of that one. Is it impregnated then or hoax? course, absolutely. You're right, guys. Brilliant. It's hoax. So both texts are similar. They're linked because they're trying to prove that the events are not part of a hoax, that both of these are arguing that these inexplicable, strange happenings are to do with the ghost and spirit world, and that both people are in agreement with that opinion. They both agree that these things can be happening. That's absolutely brilliant. Okay, guys, next slide. Okay, so this is the kind of final task for us to move us from thinking about things that are the same. So both these texts are explaining or trying to make sense of inexplicable events. Both texts are against the idea that these things can be always hoaxes, that there is some belief in the ghostly spiritual sense of the world that they're living in, even though they're written at two different times. So that gets us to begin to think about our third C. So we began by categorizing. Both these are texts about ghosts. We then looked at comparing the things that are the same. Now we want to look for the differences. So we want to think about how this text, the 19th century text with a lovely, humble Mrs. D, is different to the other text, the interview with Andrew Green, the modern ghost hunter. And to do this, I'm just going to talk you through the task and then it'll be over to you. So it says here that each of these statements in the table are all statements of differences, but they're full of mistakes. Your job is to copy and correct the table. So now this is the moment where you are actually going to put pen to paper if before you were just thinking about your answers. And we definitely want to commit this answer to paper, okay? We're going to copy and complete each statement because they're wrong. Now, I'm going to do the first couple with you just to get you going. And then we're going to pause the video and over to you. So if we look at source A, it says here, source A is a Victorian newspaper article. No, it's not. It's the 20th century article. So we would copy out that statement, but we would correct it. So we would say source A is a modern 20th century newspaper article. And then we've identified the mistake, that it's Victorian. And we've now put it into the correct form, that it's from a modern text. So source B is different. So source B over here says source B is from a modern textbook. No, spot the mistake. Definitely not a modern book. We know because it's made it clear to us at the beginning of source B that it's from the 19th century. So we would have to change that statement. Source B is from a 19th century book. So can you see what we're doing, guys? We're reading the statements, we're looking for the mistake, and then we're correcting it. But at the same time, it's also drawing attention to the differences across source A and source B. So, are you ready? When I ask you to pause, you're going to work through these statements and correct them. Now, guys, this work is only meant to take you up to 30 to 45 minutes. So if you're close to the end of the time, you're getting stressed, don't do all the statements. Maybe do 3 from source A and 3 from source B. Okay, this is not meant to stress you out. If you're coping with the time well, try and do as many as you can, okay? We're going to come back and look at the answers together shortly. So press pause, copy and complete the table, correcting the mistakes. Okay, guys, time to mark your work. Now, at this point, I've got next to me a whole bag of mini eggs because every time I get something right, I like to reward myself. Okay, maybe not as extreme as that, but don't forget to reward yourselves, okay? And those of you that are messaging me and letting me know how hard you've been working, I have been putting your kudos points on. Okay, guys, which is what we love. But we're just going to pause, go through our answers, and everyone you get right, give yourself a mark, give yourself a mini egg, give yourself something, pat on the back, whatever it is that makes you feel good. Are we ready? So source A is a modern newspaper article. Source B is different. It's from a Victorian book. Source A is an interview and doesn't include the opinion of the writer. So although our newspaper journalist is telling us everything that Andrew Green says, he isn't passing judgment on it. He isn't calling Andrew Green an idiot. He's just telling us what he thinks. Source B is different because it's an interview that does include the opinion of the writer. She makes it really clear that she trusts Mrs. D. Source A, Andrew Green is a professional ghost hunter. It's his job. Source B, Mrs. D isn't a ghost hunter. She's humble. She's uneducated. There's a few hints that she's probably a nurse because she's always with these children when they're poorly. Okay, Green investigates different types of activity, including poltergeist activity. That's his job. Mrs. D's only seen the spirits rise of children, so they're coming at this from different points of view. Finally, Green uses sophisticated equipment. Yep, he's got a bag of flour, but he's got other sophisticated equipment. Mrs. D just sees the spirits rise in different ways. A boy and a presence in the fire. Mark yourselves, give yourselves on a pat of work back,